Good morning.
Today's gospel reading will be out of Matthew chapter 25, verse 1 through 13. It will be on page 1180 on the Pew Bible. The story about 10 girls. The kingdom of heaven is like what happened on one night when 10 girls took their oil lamps and went to a wedding to meet the grooms. 5 of the girls were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but no extra oil. The ones who were wise took along extra oil for their lamps. The groom was late in arriving, and the girls became drowsy and fell asleep. Then in the middle of the night, someone shouted, "Here's the groom! Come meet him." When the girls got up and started getting their lamps ready, the foolish one said to the others, "Let us have some of your oil. Our lamps are going out." The girls who were wise answered, "There's not enough oil for all of us. Go and buy some for yourself." Well, the foolish girls were on their way to get some oil. The groom arrived. The girls who were ready went into the wedding, and the doors were closed. Later, the other girls returned and shouted, "Sir, sir, open the door for us." But the groom replied, "I don't even know you." So my disciples, always be ready. You don't know the day or the time when all this will happen. God Almighty, bless this reading in the name of His Son, Jesus Christ.
It wasn't that long ago when someone asked the question, "I want to know a little bit more about your church, and what are your doctrines?" I thought, we're not really into doctrine. And then I looked into my Bible that night, just again, looking through some of the Gospels. Jesus wasn't into doctrine. Jesus was into stories to explain the reality of God's creation. Can you think of where Jesus gets into some doctrine of, I am Jesus and God is my Father, and I was, crucified, dead, and buried. Nothing like that. Jesus was a storyteller. And that's how he tried to explain things. Except there's a little bit of a problem. When we read some of these stories today, they don't seem that they apply to us because we're living in a different century. And in particular, this story that was read this morning by Jay is one that comes to mind. The story is very relevant. It should take it for how you can use it today. Now, in today's society, when there's a wedding, you don't have the responsibility of the bridesmaids to get ready for the bridegroom, and they're the ones that greet him and open up the door to the place where the wedding's being held. And they have to have their lights, their lanterns brightly lit so he can enter and things like that. So that doesn't apply to us today, does it? But being prepared definitely applies to us today. And there's so many ways in which we need to be prepared. Was it last week or the week before we had the Great California Shakeout? How many people have at least $100 in cash? No, I don't want to know if it's in your house. Just keep that to yourself. But in cash with you, that if something happens, you'd be able to purchase something. The ATM machines, folks, will not be working. A lot of the power will be down. Does everybody have a flashlight somewhere? Think about that. Candles are not really good when it's an emergency and you don't know about it ahead of time. Because if it's an earthquake, guess what would happen if you had candles, right? They would just fall right over. How many have enough water for a week? I have to admit, I don't. I need to work on that. And like canned food that you can just flip up the lid, because your microwave probably won't be able to heat anything up. So you're going to have something out of a can that you can just take the top off. Think about some of these things. We need to be prepared, don't we? And that's I hear comments. And that's what Jesus was trying to say to them. There are so many other things too. On the day that you eventually retire is not the day to do your planning. No, it doesn't work that way. And you'll be starting on your Social Security, if that's all you have. If you're applying for a new position, you need to be prepared for the interview, don't you? If you're applying to immigration, folks, we have a few here that have that. You have to really, really be prepared with all kinds of paperwork and knowing that they're going to ask you a lot of questions, and so you need to be able to go through that. And getting to church on time is a real problem, isn't it? I don't necessarily like getting up at 5:30 in the morning to do things, but if I'm going to get here and be able to start the coffee, put the bagels down, put Bibles out, things like that, I have to get here earlier than the rest of you. But I think what Jesus was really talking about in this story about being prepared is about being prepared for Him. I want you to imagine right now that He is walking through this door, okay? Picture that. And He probably would be in modern dress. Maybe He'd come to church in blue jeans, okay? That's when a lot of people come to church. It's perfectly fine. And He would come and sit down. How would He find us? Now remember, He was not the judgmental type that would poke the finger at everyone. But are we being loyal? Are we being respectful? Are we really doing what God's will is the way He explained it to us? Are we being kind to each other? Do we truly accept each other? Do we try to help each other when someone really is in some kind of a need, whether it's a personal need or a financial need? Are we judgmental like the Pharisees? Or are we welcoming the way Jesus was? And the way He welcomed people, it's not that He approved of everything they did. It's that in order for them to change their lives, they'd have to go and meet with Him first, right? Think about it. They'd have to sit down at the table with Him and listen and talk and converse, and He would show them a better way. And that is how change would take place. Not by saying, I know what you did 5 years ago, and you are a very, very bad girl. Of course He didn't. He was probably the world's greatest psychologist, that He understood that the way to get people to listen is to be open and accepting and loving and kind-spirited. And it really worked, didn't it? He had a lot of followers, even in His lifetime. And that's the way it worked for Him. There was a Catholic priest who had to retire early because of health issues. And I can't pronounce his last name, but his first name is Joseph. Oh, you know his name? Good. And he wrote, it was called the Joshua series. And the premise of and there's a whole bunch of books that this fellow wrote. And the premise of this series is that Jesus, known as Joshua, appears out of nowhere, comes into a new community, joins a religious community, meets with the people, prays, heals, does all the things that he did when he was here in the first century. And then what happens? Jealousy. Who does he think he is? And eventually people plot to get rid of him. And then he gets killed somehow. He dies. And a number of years later, he reappears in another community. But the thing with him, he doesn't wear some white robe and have long hair and a beard or anything. He looks pretty modern. He looks like anybody who would walk through this door. What if Jesus were here right now? See, with him, you don't have to, oh, boy, I better behave myself or I'm going to get in trouble. No. But the thing is, what you would want more than anything is that he would say, you know what? This is really a good community. People really are nice to each other. They really seriously love God and love each other and want to make this world a better place just by being together in corporate worship. That would be the kindest and the most wonderful statement that anyone could make. So I want you to think about that. I want you to picture that Jesus is here with us right now, right in this building, right in this sanctuary. And he's worshiping with us, he's loving us, and he's trying to make us a better community so that we can truly outreach and serve others.